Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me to discuss the Nasdaq CTA Artificial Intelligence and Robotics Index, or NQROBO, is Mark Marex, Product Development Specialist with Nasdaq Index Research. Mark, it's great to have you with us. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Thanks for having me, Jill. Great to be back.
All right, Mark, tell us about the NQROBO Index.
Yeah, so this is another one of those custom indexes that we launched a couple years ago at Nasdaq in partnership with CTA, the Consumer Technology Association. Highly thematic index. I think it's if it's not yet super relevant for where the economy is today, it's going to be super relevant over the course of the next decade. It's a modified equal weighted index, so a little bit special in terms of the methodology here. Reconstituted semi-annually, rebalanced quarterly. CTA has this ranking mechanism where they basically say if you're a top 30 ranked firm in terms of enabling artificial intelligence or robotics, then we're going to try to make the index like 25% enablers, right? If you're an enhancer, you're going to be 15% of the index across those top 30 ranked firms. If you're an engager, you're going to have the biggest weight at 60% of the index. So, you'll see a few components here, around 2%, maybe 2.5%. That's usually the highest weighting you'll get with about 100 constituents, which is where we've sat at, as of the last rebalance. And then in terms of, like sector exposures, it's about half tech, which is not surprising, but solid chunk is industrials, almost a third. So a lot of the firms that are kind of doing the core manufacturing work to build some of the devices or the machines that are using artificial intelligence technology or are actually robotics at the end state, also make it into this index. So it's a bit more diversified in the industrials section than like something like the Nasdaq 100, which is pretty light in that area.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that you can get that kind of exposure within this index. How have the top 40 components performed?
Yeah, so it's been a crazy year, obviously for many reasons, right? If you look at the top 40 components, which I think is close to about 80% of the index, really Tesla and NIO, which is like the Chinese version of Tesla, stand out, right? They're both electric vehicle companies. NIO was up almost 400% as of end of August. Tesla was up almost 500%. Obviously, things are changing over the past few days, right? There's been some corrective movements in both of those, but those really kind of stand out. NVIDIA is the next kind of biggest performer. They really touch upon multiple areas of assisted technology, especially like in automobiles. Rapidly has kind of become like one of the most important companies in the semiconductor, if not the entire tech space. And then you can see, a ton of other companies, up year to date in the 20, 30, 40% range. Only really a handful negative year to date, which is pretty incredible considering, there's still several sectors as a whole that have been negative year to date, even with the big market recovery. But again, the main thing to keep in mind here, since it's modified equal weight, the weights are pretty evenly distributed. So the performance isn't really driven by Tesla to the extent that, a market cap weighted index is driven by Tesla.
Well, Mark, one of the things that you and I have spoken about, and one of my favorite factors contributing to the growth in the more well-known Nasdaq 100 is the company's investments in R&D. How do the NQROBO companies measure up with R&D investment?
Yeah, so, pretty strongly as you would expect. We've looked at certainly the Nasdaq 100 and a couple other indexes with this lens of patent data and looking at, patents filed over a rolling 1-year period over the course of across like 35 different, disruptive technologies that we consider to be, highly relevant today. So out of those 102 companies in NQROBO, 74 of them had at least one patent in one of those 35 disruptive technologies. And then if you actually zoom in and you start bucketing these in terms of robotics specific patents, where you've got robotic surgery, drones, autonomous vehicles, nanorobotics. You can see in the case of robotic surgery, this index, it's 2/3 of all the patent activity for the global sort of Nasdaq index of 9,000 or so global equities that we track. So really, really high concentration of patent activity in these themes. AI, similar level in terms of like deep learning and NLP, which is natural language processing. Image recognition and speech recognition are also, very, very high percentages of total global patent activity. And that makes sense because when you look at R&D expense, right, it was something like 188 billion for the year in 2019, almost 10% of the total revenue of these companies, which is, I think something like double what you see on average for something like the S&P 500.
All right, Mark, and I'm going to ask about your last two charts in the same question. How has the index performed year to date, and are you seeing growth in NQROBO ETF assets under management?
Yeah, so, again, the index performance year to date hasn't been as extreme as something like the Nasdaq 100 or even the composite, which are market cap weighted. We got up to around 20% year to date as of end of August, and has been down sort of a similar amount to those other two indexes over the past couple days. So certainly cooling off, but still easily outpacing something like the S&P 500. So pretty strong performance, especially when you consider equal weight, modified equal weight methodology, and equal weight for pretty much any index that exists on a market cap weighted basis this year has underperformed as well. So, pretty close to what we would expect. And then in terms of AUM, I mean, it's, the first ETF on this, which was launched by First Trust back about 2.5 years ago under ticker ROBT. That's the bulk of it here. We've had a very nice sort of pop of something like 70% in terms of assets under management growth from the low in late March around 90 million, and now we're about to get back up to about 150 million in total AUM across that, and a couple smaller products in Asia that are also tracking the same index.
All right, Mark, before I let you go, I just want to remind the audience of an ESG webinar that Nasdaq is hosting. You'll also get one CE credit for participation. You can find all of the details in the link below. Mark, thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Pleasure as always.